Hello everyone, I'm Babla Jonathan and this is the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. In our top stories in this edition of the news, over 15 shop owners in Bafoussam West region of the Republic of Cameroon have been sent behind bars over a land tussle. An individual claiming ownership of the land on which their shops are built has put them behind bars. They have been in detention for several days now, and another land tussle almost turns violence in Livanda village, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. The tensions were quelled down by the intervention of forces of law and order and the divisional officer of Limbe 1 subdivision. Thanks a bunch for joining us on this edition of the 6 p.m. newscast on Equinoxe television. We begin with news concerning some media practitioners who were arrested yesterday during the anti-government protests in the Yaoundé, Douala, Chang and other parts of the country, and some of the journalists who were arrested yesterday are still in detention. My Jarvis, journalist with My Media Prime Television, and the cameraman with whom he was covering the anti-government protest yesterday, are still in detention, and some journalists, notably leaders of journalist trade unions in Cameroon and his colleagues, are still struggling to secure his release. And My Jarvis and Tebon Christian, journalists with media. Tebon Christian is an audiovisual technician, and My Jarvis is a journalist, and they were working with My Media Prime Television. They were arrested by elements of the National Gendarmerie yesterday in the Bonaberi Douala 4 subdivision and taken to the Mbopi Gendarmerie command, later moved to the Legion headquarters in the Bonanjo, and after a whole day of search by his colleagues and journalist trade unionists, they were found at the Maritime Brigade at the Douala seaport. We have information streaming into our studios indicating that he may be set free today. Meantime, La Nouvelle Expression journalist Lindovi Njio spent last night at the First Central Police District in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, without any legal document to back up his detention, and the reasons for his detention remained unknown to him. And this is information from his lawyer, Barrister Sim Emmanuel, and who indicates that the journalist of La Nouvelle Expression newspaper has been finally released. Over 4 journalists were arrested yesterday, including ETV's Rodrigue Ngassi, who was released yesterday. Rodrigue Ngassi was arrested while he was covering the anti-government protests, and he was molested by forces of law and order, his clothes torn, and he was later released yesterday thanks to the energetic intervention of the Director General of Equinoxe Television, Severin Chunke, and the Center East and South Regional Bureau Chief Guy Zogo. On to something else now. We take you right away to Livanda village in the southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, where a land tussle almost turned violent, and the tensions were brought down by the intervention of forces of law and order and the divisional officer of Limbe 1 subdivision. Our correspondent Davidson Maimo reports.
Placards carrying different messages with one objective are planted in different locations within the parcel of land at Maitu in Limbe by the Niger-led CAM. According to Niger CAR, the administrative court in Boya ruled in his favor as the owner of the 50 hectares of land.
And I've restored the village. I brought the land. So we have to protect the interests of the community.
The planting of placards by the Niger-led camp was intercepted by the chief of Livanda, Motia Matthias Motia, who said Niger was acting illegally.
This document, the piece of paper they are holding, is signed by an unknown chairman of Livanda Traditional Council. So it is not a document. So people don't make themselves authorities. The courts of law and the forces of law and order will look at the document and will see if it's an order given by either the DIO, the State Council, the Procureur General, or the Senior Divisional Officer for PACO or the Governor.
This almost led to serious confrontation between the Livanda village vigilante led by Chief Motia and the Niger-led camp. But for the timely intervention from police element from the Limbe 1 police district who arrived at scene on time to maintain order.
Motia has no right to intervene for the planting of placards because there was a complete sense of the judgment of the administrative court violating of the injunctions in 2012, 2016 and 2018.
A closed-door meeting took place at the DIO's office of Limbe 1 with the Niger-led camp and the chief of Livanda village, where sources say the DIO warned of any activity on the set land without the knowledge of his office shall not be tolerated.
The head of the administration does not know how to handle matters squarely because of the bad governance and not transparency.
The land in question, we are told, the Minister of State Property and Land Tenure had issued 2 different ministerial orders sharing the set land to Bonadikombo village and Livanda village respectively. While Niger has promised to continue with the matter with the chief of Livanda village, Bonadikombo village is yet to react to the situation.
Davidson Maimo reporting from the OPEC city of Limbe in the southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. And in a similar story, 15 persons have been detained in Bafoussam over another land tussle. They have been thrown behind bars on the orders of an individual who is claiming ownership of the land on which their shops are built. Details with Innocent.
They are 15 in number whose shops are under threats to be seized allegedly by the Fumbold prosecutor and handed over to an individual claiming ownership with backup documents. We have been here for over 20 years and this person from nowhere comes in 2020 presenting a fake land title saying the shops belong to him, whereas the council has never told us the shops belong to an individual. An act of the Fumbold prosecutor condemned in strong terms by the divisional officer of Fumbold, Manu Digi. According to him, the land title, deliberation and attribution presented are fake ones.
Monsieur Mbombo Mama, qui se dit acquéreur de ces boutiques, n'a pas vraiment raison de le faire.
It is inadmissible to want to snatch 16 shops from 15 occupants and hand over to an individual who does not have these ownership rights. It is not because the plaintiff presented ill-gotten land title that we should send 15 family heads to the streets. These shopkeepers have been here since 1997.
Qu'on s'attaque à la mairie, et la mairie va se défendre.
Equinoxe team and others contacted the said individual on phone, but were told they dialed a wrong number. After thorough verification, the number was actually his. Meantime, the divisional officer said he had told the prosecutor to leave the shopkeepers alone.
Certaines personnes qui sont encore poursuivies, moi je sais qu'à mon niveau l'affaire est déjà classée.
To the mayor of Fumbold Council, Enjoya Inusa, it is inadmissible to jail more than 15 people over an illegal case since the presented documents are fake.
Nous-mêmes, nous sommes dépassés par la justice camerounaise et par l'autorité du tutel.
These documents seem to be signed in the neighborhood.
Nous l'avons trouvé nulle part dans le délibération de la commune.
Meantime, the shopkeepers have condemned their arrest and detention in Bafoussam. They question competence of the Fumbold jurisdiction.
Je suis là avec mes confrères. Je suis en cellule depuis 3 jours. Mes enfants sont à la maison seuls.
According to the Fumbot's divisional officer, Mbuo Mama did not resonate to file a complaint against the 15 occupants of the communal shops in the Fumbot subdivision.
From Bafoussam to Ezeka in the Nyong and Kele Division, Central Region of the Republic of Cameroon, where inhabitants of some 8 villages within the subdivision are lamenting over difficulties they are facing in movement and the transportation of goods within the villages, and this is because of the problem of bad roads, and they are complaining, some of them told Equinoxe television, that the money meant for the construction of a major bridge that was supposed to enhance the movement of persons and goods within the 8 villages has been embezzled. Details in this report by Fomi Armstrong Sander.
Situated 10 kilometers away from Ezeka, Limoliho and 7 other villages risk being completely cut off from the rest of Ezeka subdivision. The lone bridge that linked these villages to Ezeka through Limoliho village collapsed and has not been reconstructed several months after, according to villagers. 7 months after the landslide, we wrote to the outgoing and incoming mayors of Ezeka and even further to the senior divisional officer, but nothing was done immediately. The villagers suspect the money meant for the project has been embezzled. Money was later made available for the construction of this bridge, but nothing has been done. To say things clear, the money has been swindled. Today, they tell us that the estimate was wrongly done. Where then is the delegate for public works who did the estimate? Recalling that the 8 villages concerned are the breadbasket of Ezeka subdivision, the villagers say moving goods to and from Ezeka on the broken bridge is a veritable nightmare.
Il s'agit ici de 8 villages. Voyez les difficultés.
I am one of the largest producers of red oil in this area, but to get our produce to the market is a problem. One is obliged to hire villagers to get produce across the broken bridge.
Ici, même quand c'est le deuil, on est obligé de porter le cercueil sur la tête.
They say what must be done should be done fast in order to save Central Ezeka from a possible food crisis.
Yesterday, midnight, the offices of elections Cameroon in the different divisions across the Republic of Cameroon shut their doors to potential candidates of the upcoming regional election in the Republic of Cameroon. Midnight yesterday was, of course, the deadline for the submission of candidacy files. And here in the littoral region of the country, we spoke to the regional delegate of elections Cameroon, who gives a balance sheet of the candidacies received so far, and he also says what is going to happen next as far as the regional election is concerned. Details in this report compiled by Charles Kamer and Immaculate Fogwe.
The littoral region of Cameroon has filed in 20 lists of candidates for the December 6th regional elections. Elections Cameroon littoral delegates say the last list was submitted at 11:59 p.m. Tuesday, 1 minute to the deadline.
Elles sont réparties par département. Pour le
Mungo Division, 2 lists for traditional rulers and a list for the CPDM political party. Kamer Division, 2 lists for traditional leaders and 2 lists for political parties, which are PCRN and the CPDM party. Senegal Maritime Division, 4 lists for traditional leaders and 4 lists for political parties, that is MLDC, PCRN, CPDM and UPC. Wari Division, 1 list for traditional leaders and 4 for political parties, that is PCRN, CPDM and the 2 factions of the UPC party.
Le RDPC et l'UPC 2 fois.
Divisional election officials have 5 days to analyze the different files and disclose their observations. The list will then be sent to the headquarters of Elecam Cameroon in Yaoundé for verification by the Electoral Council. The final list will be published within 60 days, followed by litigations. Contestants will then have 5 days to defend their files. Within a time frame of 7 days, the administrative court handling the litigation will pronounce their verdict for execution by the Electoral Council.
Of Cameroon, the head of the Africa Center for Disease Control, CDC, has praised African states for managing to curb the spread of coronavirus. Africa has seen about 1.4 million people tested positive for coronavirus and 34,000 deaths since March 2020. The figures are far lower than those in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Africa's COVID-19 figures have continued declining, and Africa's CDC head John Kengasson said early interventions played a crucial role in curbing the virus spread. And for greater details on Africa's anti-COVID-19 fight, here's an extract of what he said in May this year.
Mandate in the COVID-19 response is threefold. Firstly is to work with member states to limit transmission. Secondly, to prevent deaths as much as possible. And lastly, to prevent social harm in the broader dimension. So those are the three main mandates of the Africa CDC in the COVID response. The Africa CDC has supported member states in two broad areas. First, in the preparedness, and then secondly, in the response. In the preparedness phase of the COVID pandemic, we did a couple of things. Firstly, we supported member states to equip them with the ability to diagnose the virus, which initially, as of January, no country in Africa had the diagnostics. We had the lab capacity, but lacked the diagnostics. So we supported that effort to ramp it up to 48 countries very quickly. We've also supported countries to build up their surveillance systems for the virus, that is, enhanced screening at the port of entry and to tracking the people that are infected. We've also been very active in supporting countries in their infection prevention control activities, which is critical. If we have to prevent our healthcare workers, we have to make sure that they are armed with infection prevention control measures. We've also been very keen to make sure that communication is effective by designing risk communication capacity development efforts through the partnerships or the task force that we established called the African Task Force for Coronavirus Preparedness and Response. In the response phase, we have been very active in rolling out diagnostics, placing people in countries like in Nigeria, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Zambia, South Africa, and we continue to increase our efforts to scale up the diagnostic capacity. We all know that COVID response requires that we test people, we isolate them, and trace their contacts.
Unofficial COVID-19 figures has equally been significantly dropping in the Republic of Cameroon. In the last government statement on COVID-19, the Minister of Communication and Government spokesperson Rene Emmanuel Sadi said the anti-COVID-19 strategy of the Cameroon government has been very successful, yielding fruit in terms of curbing the spread of the virus in the country. He, however, indicated that coronavirus is still there, thus the population must continue respecting the anti-COVID-19 measures and sanitation rules of the World Health Organization. In the meantime, the United States of America is now counting more than 200,000 persons tested positive for coronavirus. The United States is now topping the COVID-19 chart. Details, Euronews.
Flags planted in the ground near the Washington Monument mark a grim milestone for the United States. 200,000 people dead from the coronavirus. It's by far the highest confirmed death toll in the world. a figure unimaginable only 8 months ago when the virus first reached the world's richest nation.
But this was preventable. Not all of it, but much of it. And what could be lost in the future is preventable too, if we embrace science. Science instead of politics. At the Center for Disease Control, great scientists there demoralized by the political overturning of recommendations to save lives.
President Trump continues to blame China for the pandemic and says domestically the U.S. is already rounding the corner. Testing has increased, often using drive-through sites like here in Miami.
I feel like definitely it could have been handled better, comparable to other countries that have handled this, and even other states like New York. You know, they flatten their curve pretty quick.
But the adoption of public health measures remains mixed across the U.S. Critics say Trump has left the crisis to state governors to deal with on their own.
And latest information streaming into our studios indicates that the situation of the media practitioners working for My Media Prime Television arrested yesterday here in Cameroon's economic capital during the anti-government protests is further complicating. Mai Jarvis, journalist, and Tebong Christian, audiovisual technician, were arrested yesterday by elements of the National Gendarmerie in Bonaberi Douala 4 subdivision, and they were covering the anti-government protests orchestrated by some opposition politicians, including Professor Maurice Kamto and his CRM political party, and they were arrested and transferred to the Mbopi Gendarmerie Command and later moved to the Legion headquarters in the Bonanjo. And after a whole day of search by his colleagues and journalists, trade unionists, they were found at the Maritime Brigade of the National Gendarmerie at the Douala Seaport. And it should be noted that Mai Jarvis is one of the daring English-speaking journalists who have been extensively covering the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. Talking Point is up next. Thanks for staying with us in Talking Points. Today we are receiving Budi Raymond. He is a doctorate research fellow and political observer. He is studying political history, identity and resistance issues, international politics and generational boundaries. You're welcome.
Thank you, Babila.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
I want us to begin with yesterday's protest, the anti-government protest which took place in some towns across the Republic of Cameroon yesterday. And as I was indicating some few seconds ago, some of the journalists arrested yesterday are still being detained. Mai Jarvis and Tebong Christian of the My Media Prime Television, arrested here in Douala yesterday, are still being detained, and latest information streaming into our studios indicate that their situation is further complicating.
Thank you so much, Babila. It's good to be on TV this evening. We all observed what happened yesterday, the anti-government protest. Of course, this is what happens when people have lost confidence in the electoral system. This is what happens when unconventional politics is becoming popular. This is what happens when youths are cynical of the political system. They go on the streets, as we saw yesterday. As much as the protest fell below expectations, we think that it sends a strong message that generally we have work to do on our electoral system, so that to restitute people's failing hopes in that system, because it's a system by many people that has favored one-party dominance in a multi-party system. It's a system that has favored individuals in a system where many people are competing, and so people tend to lose hopes. Of course, teachers will tell you that there is nothing wrong with a student passing all the examinations in a class, but there is a problem when other students suspect that that student is passing not out of fairness, not out of equity. Definitely, this is a kind of a thing we see in the electoral or people's lack of confidence in the electoral system. Right, and that is why we find things like what we had yesterday.
Yeah, before we go further to talk about the electoral system, you said that unconventional politics is becoming popular.
Yes.
What do you mean by unconventional politics?
Politics other than through the ballot. Politics that goes other than through political parties that are recognized. Politics that people want to manifest through street protest. We have seen that not only in Cameroon. It has been popular in Africa. It has been popular in many countries, even in Asia and Europe. Even in the US, in bigger democracies, you would see that the moment people are suspicious or cynical of the electoral system, street protests are inevitable. And what happened yesterday is just calling us to go back and restitute people's failing confidence in this system.
In your point of view, what is bad in the electoral system? Because the government is saying the electoral system is good. Elections Cameroon is an independent institution and it's playing its role independently. And the administration and the CPDM, of course, the ruling party, think that everything is well organized within the ambits of the law. So what is bad in the electoral system that is provoking suspicion and this street protest?
Thank you so much. What is bad in the electoral system? Of course, we must admit that the electoral code that we have now is the best we have ever had since independence, because it's an improvement of the previous ones. Of course, but people are clamoring that we have not yet reached there. That is why you hear people continuing to propose a single ballot in elections. You hear people continuing to say there should be 2-round elections. You hear people continuing to call for further improvement to make the ground even more enabling. You hear people continuing to say the ELECAM, the election management body, is not completely independent and are suspicious of even those manning that body. And when this is happening, you begin to find street protest becoming popular. Of course, in some places it has even gone violent. We should be very thankful that in our case it has not gone violent. So
even though there was some violence,
some degree of violence in some places,
where repression came into play with forces of law and order, using tear gas to disperse the protesters and even torturing some journalists.
That's right. That's right. But maybe on the flip side, it would have been historical. It was going to be, by my expectation, a history-making event to see a political party leader take over or oust a sitting president, not through the ballot, but through street protest. Why do I say so? This is because elsewhere where street protests have removed sitting leaders, it is hardly ever a political party that leads those protests. It is usually the people. If you don't see it in Egypt, you would find it in Libya. If you don't find it there, you go to Syria, you would find it there. Or in Tunisia, in Algeria, all those North African countries, and even elsewhere.
Mali.
Yeah, in Mali, the same thing. You see that in Zimbabwe, what happened with Mugabe was the people. No political party was leading.
And the military.
Yes, the people and the military. So what we are saying is it was going to be news in Cameroon to see a political party leader take over, not through the ballot, but through street protest or organizing street protest. Of course, we are, the analysis and the questions around what happened continues to animate social media platforms and many other forums. But the truth is that it happened the way it did, and we are here to leave it.
And the government qualified that move as inciting violence, provoking an insurrection.
Of course.
Is that the way we should understand it? Is it actually something that was meant to be a peaceful demonstration, or to provoke some kind of chaos in the country?
Thank you. The question rotates around why the government refused authorizing it. You know that the protest happened in spite of government's refusal to authorize those protests. You know, the reason definitely.
Even though in Cameroon, the law says that you just need to declare.
To declare and then go ahead. Of course, perhaps the leaders or the organizers of the protest went by that. The point remains, this has to do with democracy. Yes, I'm coming because you touched something on journalists. This has to do, it's a democratic practice. And it is not only old-fashioned or archaic to deny people right to protest peacefully. It is also very irreconcilable with democratic practices. It doesn't happen in real democracies. Of course, we have a nascent democracy which we are building, we are growing in it. But the truth is that in democracies, those liberties should be allowed sometimes. I understand that sometimes the stakes are too high. The questions of security and peace, the government wrestle with such things.
And that is what the authorities have been saying, that we want to preserve public peace and stability.
Good.
And so this is not going to help the situation. This is going to provoke violence. It's going to provoke chaos. This is what the administrative authorities have been saying. But now the question is how to reconcile the efforts to protect the peace and stability of the country and then violating the rights of the people.
Beyond that, you could find a tussle between people's quest for their rights and the government's determination to uphold our authority. That was what was happening actually in the build up to the protest of yesterday and in the protest itself. Government is hitting hard and maintaining that she is in charge, while on the other hand, those organizing protests are claiming they have the right to organize those protests. And we find all what happened was rotating around authority versus quest for rights. And that is what exactly we lived yesterday.
When this begins to happen in a country, what do we read within the lines of the nearest future?
Of course, if you did a study, just a casual study of those who manifested on the streets, most of them are in their 20s and 30s. There are those who have known no other president but one. And of course, they begin to question, how fair is the electoral system? Can we continue to trust it? These are some of the things we can read in between the lines. And as we indicated earlier, you realize that the electoral system has not sustained people's hopes and confidence. That is why you begin to find such things as well. The electoral system seems to have given people reasons to think that it is not to be trusted. And so, as much as it is the best, as much as it is an improvement of what used to exist, there is room for further improvement so that people's hopes in the electoral system could further be strengthened and this strict politics should stop. Otherwise, we'll continue to be violent and destroying the things we have taken so much, of course, to build, which is uncalled for altogether.
And some journalists and other media practitioners were arrested yesterday. Earlier I was talking about Tamai Jarvis and Tebon Christian of My Media Prime Television, who are still in detention as we speak now. What's your take on this? Journalists doing the job and they are arrested and detained.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. The questions of journalists being arrested and detained is very close to my heart. It is something that, like I indicated earlier, is a democratic issue. And we are a budding democracy. These are things we should protect to show the world that we are making efforts to build our democracy. That in a democracy, journalists are arrested is irreconcilable. I have a lot of respect for journalists, but beyond that, journalists more than ever before in crisis and protests, must, and I know they organize these seminars. I cannot give out, of course, professional lessons to journalists, but I believe that there is need at all the time for journalists to uphold their professional ethics. There are some journalists, especially in crisis situations like what we have in our country now, that have lost complete respect for them because they have lost their sense of professionalism completely and sometimes go out of proportions. But in a protest where journalists are picked up in trying to gather information, I think that it is irreconcilable to or with democratic practices in a democracy.
And the journalists of my media prime television, they were picked up in Bonaberi even after due presentation, and Kamer Jarvis was equally putting on his press jacket just to say that he was properly identified, his colleague Tebon Christian properly identified, but they were picked up and they are still in detention till now.
It is, to say the least, regrettable, very unfortunate that this should be happening. It has happened several times in the crisis areas of our country. Journalists have faced these problems, sometimes caught in between, in fact, hard pressed from both ends by conflicting parties. If it is continuing to happen, I think that there is need to improve on our democratic practices.
And another issue raising eyebrows, raising questions after the journalists of La Nouvelle Expression were released and the journalists of the audiovisual technician of Equinoxe television released after the energetic intervention of the management. Is that the case of Kamer Jarvis and Tebon Christian? They were arrested in Bonaberi, transferred to the Mbopi Gendarmerie Command, and later to the Legion head office in Bonanjo. And today, after a whole day of search by his colleagues and journalists, trade unionists, they were found at the Maritime Brigade in the Douala Seaport. This movement from one detention center to another, from one institution to another. How can we understand this?
It is difficult to understand. Only those who are into that can give further explanations. It is quite difficult. That sometimes they are even held incommunicado for months, for weeks, and some have died in detention. We have seen cases of some that have died in detention. I think that if there is any case against journalists, let the legal process be launched and let them be treated with dignity, even in detention, as men of a noble profession. I think that it is also having so much to do with our democracy. Like I say, we have our image at stake when we continue to do things like this, and it is necessary that we reconsider that.
The Cameroon English-speaking Journalists Association and the Committee to Protect Journalists CPJ have all called for their immediate and unconditional release, but now they are still in detention. And besides the electoral code, one of the issues that provoked the protest yesterday is the Anglophone crisis that has continued deteriorating for close to 4 years today. And the CRM political party, the Popular Action Party, the CPP are saying that this crisis has to be solved as fast as possible before many more deaths are recorded, before things completely get out of hand. And they're saying that we cannot be organizing elections in this present context. What's your take on that?
That is right. The crisis has gone on for 4 years or so, and it's still going on, unfortunately. The different kinds of solutions have been proposed. Even on this platform, people have proposed all kinds of solutions. And the government is doing what she is doing to also address it. I am tempted to say, of course, lives have gone. If we do not have respect for the human life in the northwest and southwest, these are Cameroonians. Those who are dying are Cameroonians. If we do not have respect for the economic situation of these regions, if we do not have any consideration for the misery that the people are going through You see frustration on people's faces as you move through the streets in these regions. If we do not have consideration for that, at least for the sake of a national value, which is unity of our nation, we should address that problem immediately. This is because right from childhood I have learned that one of our values as a nation is national unity. If federalism will promote the unity of our nation, why don't we go there? Why do we see federalism as divisive instead? Of course, why can we not understand that federalism is the default system of government in our country, going by its historical evolution? It is the default. Any other system is artificial.
We should go back to...
Yeah, let us go back.
Where we were?
Where we were.
In the federal
because
system,
that is what...
two-state federal system.
Of course, that is what gives constitutional safeguard to two identities that came together. We were talking about an identity issue. We are not talking about just a mean issue of marginalization. It's an identity issue. A people, you know, two people coming together. And if they say this system of government is what will assure us to stay together well, it should not take us losing more lives to get back there. It's as easy as that. I think we should consider
it is solving the problem with the decentralization and the recent code promulgated into law by the government and the special status that is being gradually implemented in those two regions and the regional election that's coming up. These measures, these actions taken by government, are they helping?
Those are very laudable efforts. They are very good efforts, which we must commend. But if it has not addressed the issues on the ground, it means it is a process. Let us continue in the same spirit until we get to the bottom. But it should be fast so that we don't record more casualties, even as it is happening every day. I think that it is necessary we consider that, oh, we have lost too much. If this is what will bring us the much cherished peace, if this is what will ensure our unity as a nation, let us get back there speedily and stop playing about and wasting more lives and destroying our economy even more.
All right, Budi Raymond, doctorate research fellow and political analyst studying political history, identity and resistance issues, international politics and generational boundaries. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Babila. My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Goodbye.
Equinoxe Télévision, au-delà de l'image, nous rendons compte.